Hey, I'm Derek, it's me, Derek, and we got a new camera at Black Friday, and I got a new chair. So things can look slightly different, or worse, or better. Either way, this is Stop Skeletons from Fighting. Hey, I already put you on the spotlight for DS slot life with some of the craziest uses for the GBA slot on the DS, which was only available on the original DS and the DS Lite models. But what about the stuff that the average DS enthusiast would encounter in the wild? I mean, you probably don't have a piano attachment gathering dust in your closet, but there are DS games that work with the GBA cart that unlock new content, ones that you might have right now. Of course, the most famous use of the dual slot action was for Pokemon. The 4th generation Pokemon DS games could interface with the 3rd generation Pokemon GBA games, but link cables didn't work between these two systems, so using the dual slots on an original DS or DS Lite was the only way to migrate your old GBA Pokemon into Generation 4. All you had to do was pretty much finish the game, finish the main story, and gain access to the Pokedex, and then meet Professor Oak, and then go to Pal Park. That's it. To be honest here, the last time that I finished a Pokemon game to completion, there was a tight 3-minute rap that named all of them.
It's been 3,000 years.
Hey, I'm a little out of my element here, so I brought the brightest Skelebro Pokemon slot scholar of our generation, Mr. Lockstin.
What? Hello? Yes. Hi, that's me, I think.
Yeah, Lockstin, it's you, Lockstin. Wait, that's my joke. I choose you, Lockstin. That's a bad joke. Anyway, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on.
No, dude, thank you for giving me the time. Please, walk me through this. Why is Pokemon migration from Gen 3 to Gen 4 so confusing?
So, under normal circumstances, Pokemon live wherever they are the most comfortable, which is why you can find specific Pokemon only in specific places, for the most part, that is. We do know that most species of Pokemon will have their explorers migrating far and wide across the globe, perhaps traversing the regions, or just sheer curiosity.
Right, and then you put the 2 games in the slots.
Yeah, and in the Sinnoh region, the locals have built a park specifically to attract these foreign Pokemon, likely to spruce up their region's biodiversity. I don't know if you've noticed, but Sinnoh is severely lacking fire types.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I knew that. I knew that. Totally. You're just testing me, and I passed the test because I'm smart.
But anyway, they called it Pal Park, and it especially attracts Pokemon from Kanto and Hoenn who were just released by their trainers. And they migrate all the way here. And while they are in this park, you can catch them. And later on in Kanto, they did the same thing.
Biodiversity. When did Pokemon become so complicated? I mean, it's just like rock, paper, scissors, right?
Cute. Maybe if there were, 18 different symbols with 2 variants each. But anyway, the Pokemon Company even migrated rare Pokemon into your collection via special containment devices distributed at special events, like this Deoxys.
Wait, so they just distributed Pokemon this way? They didn't do anything else cool, like the berry patch on the e-reader? Missed opportunity, man!
Oh, Derek, that's more just a quick fix. That's only migrating data, not entire Pokemon. Completely different. While this second slot method was less cost-effective, it was a lot easier to do, both for the companies involved and the people receiving them. I mean, plug the second cartridge into the second cartridge slot, data transfer. It's a lot simpler than needing an e-reader and swiping some cards a couple of times, or needing to plug your handheld device into the cable that's just dangling there at a store. It's easier this way.
But to be fair, the e-reader is a way dumber method. That's a point in my book. But fine, yes, okay. So technology and convenience finally converge on the DS, so I can finally migrate all my Pokemon over, right?
Unfortunately, no. Certain Pokemon ecosystems are permanently shut off from the rest due to... Poke Walls is the opposite of Pokeballs. They keep them out instead of in.
Wait, Poke Walls? This is the dumb stuff and the totally real stuff that I love.
Real walls are not very effective against migration, but the original Gens 1 and 2, as well as the new Gen 8, all have super effective Poke Walls in place. I hope that clears some things up.
Wait, so you've been able to move your Pokemon up from every Pokemon game since 2002 until now?
Well, yeah. Well, if they're allowed into Galar, anyway. Otherwise, you have to wait until Pokemon Home comes out.
So we're just waiting for Game Freak to finally figure out how to use the internet. It's 2019. It's fine. That's fine. And thankfully, the other Pokemon GBA slot games aren't quite as complicated, so I can take it from here. Thank you, dude.
No problem. And next time, could we have our skeletons battle? It'd be pretty funny, all things considered.
Hey, we're stop skeletons from fighting, not prevent consensual fisticuffs. But thank you so much for explaining all that, Lockstin. Pokemon. And would you believe it? even the Pokemon spin-offs from this time also have connectivity with the DS GBA slot. Pokemon Dash, for example, also works with the Gen 3 GBA games. But I like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team the best because it's one of the few games that had a tandem red and blue release on the GBA and DS at the same time. There's a few things you can do with both games inserted into the DS, but the main one is that if your Pokemon team faints in one game, you can use the other game to rescue that team without losing money or items. Well, honestly, there's enough hot slot action in the Pokemon verse that it's worth getting a DS or a DS Lite just so you can transfer your team and utilize all the extra features. But that's enough Pokemon. How about we change gears from Pokemon innovation to Hideo Kojima innovation with Lunar Nights and the Boktai games. Boktai is a series of GBA games that have solar sensors built into the cartridge, basically, so you can use actual sunlight to fight off the game's vampires. Well, you're supposed to use sunlight. If you instead live in a place as luminous as Seattle in the winter, you can cheat and just use a blacklight. Stay indoors. By the time the series' fourth entry, Lunar Nights, got released onto the DS, they had to take out the game's expensive sensor. But they got around this by letting you put the previous 3 games in the GBA slot. Yes! This means that not only does Lunar Nights use the GBA slot, it uses the solar sensor on the GBA carts to restore different stats for your inactive characters, depending on the game. It's not necessary for completing Lunar Nights, but it's still really impressive that they still found a way to work in that tech. And I want to give the game credit for actually mentioning all of this in the instruction book, which is pretty rare for peripherals like this. I don't know why they don't talk about it. Put it on the box! How cool is that? But that's not all you can do with Boktai. It also works with freaking Mega Man Battle Network 5 Double Team, which is possibly the most feature-packed Battle Network game ever. Battle Network 5 Double Team was the first Battle Network game to come out on the DS, so it works with every Battle Network game that came before it, which is seriously, there's so many. Capcom was pumping out these games like it was rabbits breeding back then. It was just nuts. But I just really want to highlight that this is a Capcom game that works with a Konami game, which, like, you can't cross the streams like that. I mean, what's gonna happen? Mega Man's and Solid Snakes living together? Mass hysteria. Also, apparently, the Soul Cross that you get from Boktai 2 completely breaks the game. Good stuff. But this is just a small sampling of the games that work in tandem with other DS games. Plugging in Castlevania Aria of Sorrow into Dawn of Sorrow makes a Mina doll appear in the shop, which doesn't really affect anything in the game except for soothing my inner Dracula rage. We all have it. It's part of growing up. It's nothing major, but I owned these games for years and had absolutely no idea about any of this stuff. And there's similar bonus content for Mega Man XZ, Advance Wars, The Sims, and Frogger. Did you know there were so many Frogger games and they all worked together to unlock bonus stuff? Somebody out there had a way better childhood than me. What's up with these guys, huh? Maybe you've seen these around at retro shops, and as you can probably guess, they are not actually GBA games, but DS accessory packs. We got the Memory Expansion Pack, the Rumble Pack, and the Motion Pack. I want to start with this one because it's spelled P-A-C-K, which is how you actually spell the word pack, Nintendo. The Motion Pack houses an accelerometer to detect motion and is used in exactly one game, Tony Hawk's Motion, aka the worst rated Tony Hawk game until Pro Skater 5 came out 7 years later. I love how everything about this game is absolutely unnecessary. It was released in November 2008, which was the same month as the DSi, which, if you'll remember, did not have a GBA slot, so the timing wasn't right. It's a Tony Hawk game where you steer by turning the system, and of course it has all the nuance of trying to steer a cow onto a half pipe. Oh, my life to use this game with the Taito paddle instead. On top of that, even though we got all the accesses of motion, it uses every button on the DS for tricks, plus you gotta tap the touchscreen to do specials. I admire the moxie, but why would you make a motion game that uses so many buttons? This game was made by Create Studios, or Creat, there's no E, I don't know, who had a tough act to follow since handheld Tony Hawk games actually had a pretty good track record before this thanks to Punching Weight Heroes' Vicarious Visions. I actually really like this game from a Garbo curiosity standpoint now, but I think back then, no one was really ready to accept the fact that the Tony Hawk franchise, the great Tony Hawk franchise, was in freefall. The shocker here was the bonus game packed in, Hue Pixel Painter. This is a totally separate game. It has nothing to do with Tony, and it's a shame it had to share the spotlight. It's a charming little game where you cover your little guy in paint and connect dots around areas of a map to bring color and light to the world. It's like a hybrid ActRaiser and Kicks. It's cute, simple, way more fun than Hawk's Motion. I mean, this should have been the main game with Tony Hawk as the bonus. Seriously, track down this game, but for Hue Pixel Painter. But of course, Activision wasn't the only ones to shove extra tech into a GBA cart. Nintendo also made peripheral cartridges that are compatible with a whole slew of games like the Nintendo DS Rumble Pack. This is like a throwback to the N64 era, and it works with a surprising number of games, 50. But I actually only have 4 compatible games, none of which are Metroid Prime Pinball, which is what the Rumble Pack was bundled with in the US. It works about as well as you'd expect, and I didn't find it to be too loud or that intense, but I noticed that all the compatible games I own use it differently, and some don't use it that well. It's weird that people were still struggling with Rumble in the mid-aughts, but it's really good in games like Partners in Time, where it helps with timing my crit hits, and I loved how it pulsed to the awesome soundtrack of Space Invaders Extreme, though it did make me have to choose between playing with Rumble or the paddle, and oh man, too bad I couldn't have both. Alright, so if you've made it this far in the video, I got a real treat for you, and it is the Nintendo DS Memory Expansion Pack, aka maybe the single most useless thing we have ever covered on Punching Weight. You maybe didn't even know about this because while it adds an extra 8 megabytes of RAM to the Nintendo DS, the sole game that used it was the DS's crappy Opera-based web browser. 2 of these bad boys were actually released, this GBA size one and then a half-size one for the DS Lite. In the US, this one was only available online through the mail, so this cart is actually kind of rare, but I paid $5.50 for it, so it definitely ain't valuable. Now, you'd think that this would have worked like the N64 expansion pack, and in theory it would, except that the N64 and the DS are pretty different systems, and the extra RAM just wasn't necessary, I guess. Not surprisingly, the homebrew community found the most use for it, though as far as I can tell, the only true game that can use the official Nintendo Memory Expansion Pack is the homebrew of Quake 1, and even there, it's optional. Some third-party expansion packs are produced that are used for homebrew applications, but in terms of the official cart, that's about it. And for the record, we could have bought the DS browser for this video, but then I would have had an actual use for this thing, and no, listen. I have in my GBA collection a truly, completely useless object, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The DS in its slot, so many mysteries, so much wonderful stuff there. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to our Patreons.